The Senior Community Center's Something to Talk About programs are sponsored by Fieldstone Communities, Bainbridge Island. Fieldstone offers memory care along with assisted and independent living, now accepting residents. They also offer day stay and respite programs. Call 360-689-4314 to schedule a tour of Fieldstone's apartments on Rolling Bay today. And we'd also like to acknowledge that we are gathering on the ancestral homeland of the Suquamish people, the people of the clear salt water, who have lived on this water of the Salish since time immemorial. We honor them and are grateful for their hospitality. And today we are happy to have David Harrison give us views on what's going on at the political scene. Hi, David.
Hello, thanks for joining us. I'm on the East Coast. I'm sharing time zone with Christina, but it's a pleasure to check in. It's as confusing a time as it's been. I used to fancy that I could figure all this out, and there are so many subgroups of Republicans lately that it's hard to sort. So today, we're going to start with the aftermath of the debate and try and figure out what's happening with Republican candidates for the presidency. Then we're going to talk about Republican leadership challenges in both the Senate and the House. As you know, Mitch McConnell's falling upon hard times physically, and Kevin McCarthy is falling on hard times politically. So we'll take that up, and then we'll end with what Democrats might want to do about all of this. But as I say, it's an unusual time in that the coalitions are changing so much, especially in the House, that we certainly are in danger of having a governmental shutdown on October 1st because of differences between MAGA Republicans and super MAGA Republicans. In fact, I predict that will happen. I don't see how it's going to be resolved before then. So I'm going to turn that fan off, or you're going to be distracted by it the whole time I'm talking.
I know I was getting hypnotized by your fan.
Did not know it was there. So you may remember that I'm a fan of lanes. And in lane one, well, I'll talk about who's winning what lane, because we've got clear victors in 2 out of 3 lanes. In lane number 3, the lane of people who do not have a chance of becoming president and running for a unique opportunity to publicly criticize Donald Trump. Chris Christie has won that lane over Asa Hutchinson and others. He, in fact, is going to get some votes in New Hampshire when that happens in February. Maybe he'll get 10% of the vote, and he gets reported upon. And considering the number of times in the past that Donald Trump humiliated Chris Christie, he's good at it. He should have been good at it much earlier in his career, but he let himself suck up to Trump for years. And we paid the price. In lane 1, the victor, 2 people in lane 1, Donald Trump and the person who wants to be Donald Trump, Ron DeSantis, and the winner is already declared. DeSantis is totally not going to be president of the United States, and he's not going to be the candidate. It's worth thinking about how that happened, because at the beginning, he had Murdoch and Fox News, the New York Post, which Murdoch owns, on page 32 when Trump announced. The headline was, "Florida man announces for president." Murdoch doesn't want Trump to be president because any number of reasons. At any rate, so it's worth thinking about why Ron DeSantis is not going to win, considering he had immense financial support. He was being advantaged by having strong victory in Florida over although that was over the should have been retired Charlie Crist. At any rate, I think there's a couple things. I don't think DeSantis ever decided whether to criticize Trump or not criticize Trump. And I think he decided halfway in between, criticize him, but not in a way that would make Trump really furious. So the second thing that happened is beyond campaign mismanagement is DeSantis tried to figure out a theme. And the theme, as you know, is Florida is the place where woke goes to die. Let me tell you, that didn't catch on. Fred Johnson from Ashtabula does not know what the heck that means, and that's why it didn't take hold. And even though he might have had polls or something that said that was going to, the culture wars are there. They're being fought in small towns across America, but nonetheless, that wasn't going to carry the day. The third problem with DeSantis is people don't like him. People who served in Congress with him almost well, not uniformly, but if they don't care what he thinks of them, they'll say the truth. He was a loner when he was in Congress, and he never communicated unless he wanted something. So at any rate, he deserves not to move forward. So as you know what I'm going to say. It's all about who's in lane two. If you're convinced that national polls, the Wall Street Journal has with Trump over 50% are the answer, I think that's not right. I think the polls in New Hampshire and Iowa are more interesting because that's where the races are. And I think what the story is for somebody in lane two is to do well enough in Iowa and New Hampshire for people to start ending the race, leaving the race and supporting them. And so who could that be? I'm still of the feeling that Mike Pence cannot get traction, not just because he didn't allow Trump to unconstitutionally overturn the election. He's a pretty colorless guy, and his career was not on a meteoric rise when Trump picked him. Trump may have been wise to pick him, but I don't think he's got traction. And the fact that he and Ramaswamy are beating up on each other is, no one cares, you guys. You might as well stop. No one cares whether you're taking little snipes at each other. What people care about, I think, post-debate is Nikki Haley and Tim Scott. I think that's really the game, unless somebody new comes in. And to me, my own opinion, Tim Scott, I think, receded in the debate. And I think Nikki Haley did what she was trying to do, which is have her energy and her personality try and count for something. I think she's chosen the age issue well. She's got Trump in with Biden on age, which I think is canny because he can't lie about that. People know what his age is. So I also think Haley's UN ambassador thing will play well. So I predicted New Hampshire and Iowa that she'll get up to a number of 15 or 20% where people will start paying attention. That all, of course, depends on what happens between now and then. Interestingly, in the issue of whether we should think this race is over, as some of you who follow this closely know, the trial date for the federal charges of what happened on January 6th is in early March of next year, and the trial date for the federal charges on classified materials is in May. Meanwhile, people are trying to escape the Florida charges, and there'll be testimony or trying to get them into federal court, and so there'll be testimony going forward from now until then. So Trump's legal problems will be in the news every day, and I think that ultimately will depress his Iowa and New Hampshire numbers. 57% of Republicans say they'd be very interested in having a new leader. That doesn't mean they won't vote for Trump if they think Trump has the best chance of winning. But I do think that the media is overstating Trump's strength at this point. I do think that one factor that supports Nikki Haley and Lane 2 over Tim Scott is, I think, the Republican Party is more racist than misogynist. I think that it would be harder for a Black person to win in the Republican Party than a woman. But that isn't to say that the Republican Party at its core doesn't discriminate against women every day of the year. I'm just saying they have elected Nikki Haley before, and I just don't think. I think there's fundamental racism in the Republican Party that will make it a bigger problem for Tim Scott than it should be. So that's my view. As you may remember, I think there's people waiting in the wings. The press is calling this an emergency break this glass candidates. And the number one among them is Glenn Youngkin, who says every day that he's not running and meets every day with his campaign advisors to see whether he should run. Glenn Youngkin is a tiny bit more toward the center than most of these folks. And he won an important race in Virginia, so I don't think it's out of the question. The reason I feel better about Haley and Scott and Youngkin is they've actually read the Constitution and believe it's a meaningful document. They might interpret it differently than us. So that would be a step above some of these other folks. So I think this is what's happening. The second, as you know, person in the wings, surprisingly, still talked about is Brian Kemp, the governor of Georgia. You'd think, given that he helped blow the whistle on Trump, that he would have no chance. But Brian Kemp was well-spoken, and I no longer think it's out of the question. He's certainly thinking about it. So I think if it was me and I was, say, chair of the DNC, I would not want to run an 82-year-old candidate against the next generation. Boy, if Youngkin or Nikki Haley's running, please don't run a really nice, effective, dear-hearted 82-year-old man, because we're not going to have the presidency if we do that, in my view. 70% of Democrats don't think Joe should run, and the reason they think that Joe shouldn't run is Joe shouldn't run. He just does not have the physical and mental energy to be president when he's 85 years old. So what's going to happen on these candidates between now and next January? We don't know. Something could happen, but one thing that will happen between now and then is Republicans will shut down the government. I'll say a little bit about this on the leadership challenge, but there's four things happening that make House Republicans angry. One is, as you know, the Defense Department has made it possible for soldiers, women soldiers who want and need an abortion to get to travel to states where it's abortions are provided. Secondly, Republicans think they lost the big budget battle 6 months ago with Kevin McCarthy and Joe Biden, and they're still mad. So there are some really serious people who want another 5% in cuts, even though that's not what was agreed to. Thirdly, there's a big dispute, as you know, over Ukraine. And there might be 80 House Republicans that wouldn't mind fighting over that. That's surprising to me when when patriots are fighting against despots, it's surprising to me. And I'll say wait later why Biden doesn't try to take advantage of that politically, because there's a reason for that. And then fourthly, they think they've got an issue with Joe and Hunter that they would like to take advantage of as a part of the budget bill that has to be passed by October 1st. So basically, to make a long story short, they want a continuing resolution that would maintain budget levels pretty much like the Senate wants, only to make a few judicious cuts and take a shot at Biden over Hunter and fix their turmoil over abortion. And they want a lot of things. The problem is Senate Republicans don't want those things. So it's not just MAGA Republicans like Kevin McCarthy fighting against ultra MAGA Republicans in the House. It's both of them doing things that Senate Republicans don't want to do. They're proud they passed all 12 appropriations bills. Susan Collins did that with Patty Murray, and they're just nothing but proud about that. And even the Josh Hawleys of the world do not want to start over on this. So anyway, theme number one, where we're left, is me arguing that there's still a lane, that it's going to be occupied by Nikki Haley or Tim Scott or Glenn Youngkin or Brian Kemp, that the stories that the nominations that the nomination is done and it's Donald Trump are not true, that the national polls are being misinterpreted, and the number of Republicans and independents that don't want Donald Trump is, if you're a Republican leader, it's problematic. The fact that he polls okay against Joe Biden is not a very good test, because Joe Biden is being blamed for inflation in America. So it's hard to poll high when people think that their paycheck is going away or is receding. So that's theme number one. Let's stop and talk about our candidates, and then I'll go to the Republican Leadership Challenge. Questions, thoughts, concerns? Hi, Tom, back from Ohio. Congratulations on your victory. Did you go out to work on that, or did you just happen to be there? You're muted. You're not going to answer? Yeah, there you are.
I didn't work on it, but I had a good friend who really hadn't done anything, politically before. He jumped into that and went door to door. He's a retired attorney. So it really, really energized people. They were really upset about what they tried to do, what the Republicans tried to do.
So as people may know, what they tried to do is change the approval percentage for the initiative process from 50% to 60%, so that the choice initiative on the ballot in November would have a less chance, but they failed miserably to do that. So we'll win that. We'll expand choice dramatically in Ohio in November. Anything on these specific candidates?
One other point about that. The other thing that's happening is Sherrod Brown is up in November, and this, the results here should be a big help to Sherrod's race.
No, he's up, as you know, a year from November, but nonetheless,
yeah.
Anything like that would be good. People are worried because Tim Ryan lost, but Tim Ryan and Sherrod Brown are not the same person. So I would be worried, sure. And if we had a debacle a year from November, it's people like Sherrod Brown, John Tester in Montana, who could face plant, and all of a sudden we could end up with 45 senators. In fact, there's an argument, as you know, since we have so many people up, that we have a better chance of winning the House than we do keeping the Senate. We'll get into that in upcoming months, but we need a good, strong national presidential candidate, and we haven't worked that out yet. luckily for us, they're going to close down the government. The other side is. They're wrong on choice. They're wrong on Ukraine. They've got a convict or a felon, an almost felon, who's touring the country and telling lies. So they're helping us as much as they can, but we should help ourselves a little bit too. Anything else? Let's go to the leadership challenge. So here, this is really interesting. You could have a situation where neither the House Speaker nor the Senate Minority Leader is in office in January, is leader in January. That could happen. I hereby predict, and you can take it to the bank, that Kevin McCarthy is not going to be ousted because there's nobody to replace him. They're not going to, Republicans are not crazy enough to make Jim Jordan Speaker of the House. Steve Scalise has cancer, bless his soul, so it's not going to be him. There's no leader in the wings. The reason they selected Kevin McCarthy is he's not as ideologically driven as some of the rest of them. He's somewhat interested, as he proved in the deal with Biden, of having the government actually function. But what you're seeing in the House now is the seeds that were sown when he was selected. So as you may remember, it only takes one member to move to vacate the speakership. So Matt Gaetz or somebody can do that anytime they want. In the meantime, there's those four messy issues. They don't want to solve the budget without, they don't want a continuing resolution or any resolution that allows the government to stay open as long as we're transporting soldiers out of state to exercise choice, as long as there aren't further budget cuts. They're worried about the $24 billion that we want for Zelensky. And they're thinking, I don't know whether they really believe that Joe Biden benefited from Hunter, but Hunter certainly did benefit from Joe. So that's not going to go away. It's just one more unfortunate thing that we have to deal with when we should be dealing with other stuff. It's not going to go away. It's true that they make things up and don't. You can say a lot of bad things about the other side, but on our side, you could say, please don't publicly benefit through millions of dollars by your dad being vice president. Try and keep yourself under a modicum of control under that front. So in the House, McCarthy's got a dilemma. They want things he can't give them. You may remember when Biden and McCarthy cut a deal, there had to be a rule passed by the Rules Committee, Ways and Means in the House, and that rule had to set up conditions for debate because there's 435 of them. Thomas Massey, I guess from Kentucky, voted with McCarthy on that. It's not clear they've got the votes even to have a rule for debate. And there are technical ways that Hakeem Jeffries could help McCarthy overcome that. The problem with that is Hakeem Jeffries wouldn't do that with Democratic votes unless he got something in return. But McCarthy's in a real mess. And I'm here to tell you, there's a lot of these kinds of budget disputes where everybody knows how it's going to be resolved. This is not one of those. This is not one of those kabuki theater things where they all say this or that and the market gets spooked and we lose 1,000 points off the Dow and then they resolve it and everybody shakes hands outside the White House. This isn't that. McCarthy doesn't have a way forward right now. If they move to vacate the speakership, there are some pundits who are assuming that since Democrats don't want a Republican speaker, that they would vote with the most conservative Republicans to vacate McCarthy and he would be defeated. I think that's baloney. Hakeem Jeffries is not going to take down the speaker in concert with extra maniacal people. It's not going to happen. So there's got to be a way forward, but I'll be darned if I can tell you what it is. The Senate is much clearer. The doctors are saying that Mitch is just having the after effect of a concussion, but I think there's more going on there. You've seen the tape, and it's scary. He's just freezing. He's blanking. He can't make his brain work, and I feel for him. The Andy Beshear, the governor of Kentucky, refuses to promise that he would name a Republican as Mitch's successor. So that confuses things. Republicans passed a bill in Kentucky that he had to do that. He says it's unconstitutional, that it deprives him of constitutional powers of the governorship. So Mitch could retire as minority leader and then stay in the Senate. We got people 10 years older than him right now, Dianne Feinstein and Grassley, who have no business being there. So if that happens, then it's not going to be Rick Scott, who challenged McConnell before. It'll be somebody who's admitted that Trump lost the election. So it'll be John Thune, which is 18 years ago or so. It was John Thune of South Dakota who beat Tom Daschle, who was a favorite of many of us. He, by modern day Republican standards, is a moderate, but at least he's recognized that Trump lost the election. So that's a nice thing. It'll be him. The other possibility is Cronin of Texas, a little bit more bite to him, but these folks are heaven to work with as opposed to the Ted Cruz's of the world. I wanted to say one other thing. I may have said it months ago. Years ago, I worked a little while for Maria Cantwell, and I was saying bad things about Harry Reid, the senator of Nevada, as a particularly unspectacular, uncharismatic Democratic leader. And she said, you don't elect a majority leader to be charismatic. You elect a majority leader who knows how to take care of his caucus. And so that's the understory of all these folks. They're not electing a president. They're not electing a person who does look at Schumer. There'd be lots of people better on the microphone than him. It's just he takes care of his caucus. So my prediction on the leadership challenge is McCarthy will find a way to survive, and I'm here to tell you, I don't know how. They keep from having October 1st closing. I don't know how he fixes that. I don't know how he gets enough Democratic votes to overcome the 15 votes he'll lose on the far right. He has to give Hakeem Jeffries something to get those votes. I just don't know how this is going to happen. On the Senate, Mitch McConnell's not going to be minority leader much longer. He just doesn't. It won't be. They'll go see him, and that won't be allowed. It's too important to them to have an active minority leader to just cover up for him. So that's what I have to say about issue number 2. Questions, thoughts, concerns?
Well, one thing about Republicans closing the government down, because they're the only ones that ever do, it never works out well for them.
Well, that's true. And that's why McCarthy would just soon not do it. I don't remember since the time Newt closed it down that there has been any showdown on closing the government that has been good for that party. I will say this, some of them want to close it down because they don't want to spend as much money as Kevin agreed to. So at least that's a principle, I guess. So it is true that we have a national debt issue. However, they have an interesting way of deciding what to cut.
Exactly.
They tend to cut things that help human beings to survive.
Yeah.
Other comments on leadership? Hey, Reed.
I'm just curious, I had not, I had been, I guess, under the illusion that Kabuki theater was in the making and that somehow there was going to be some wiser minds that would say, okay, we're going to make a deal to keep the government open, or at least to reopen it. If, as you say, it shuts down, it seems like the people who are going to shut it down are in no hurry to reopen it. This could be very, very ugly, right?
Well, what usually, when it shuts down, what usually causes it to be reopened? So that's the issue. So first, the natural way to keep it from shutting down is you're not passing all the appropriations bills, so you pass a continuing resolution. What that does is it includes continuous spending at present authorized appropriated levels, and that's what they're calling a clean continuing resolution. There's not enough support for that. They want a continuing resolution that takes that gets enough votes, but takes some shots at Democrats at the same time. And that's a little harder because they'll still lose some Republicans, so they need some votes for Hakeem Jeffries that they can't get if they take shots at Biden. So that's why I don't know what the answer is. But what precipitates the ultimate resolution is just one thing. A lot of supporters of the Republican Party are investors, and a lot of their investments are in the market. And about a week into a shutdown, the market gets very nervous, and people start, these are gains on paper, but people tend to think when they see it in their brokerage report, they tend to think it's theirs, and they get very annoyed when 10% of it goes away. I don't know why that is. So that's what would end it.
Explain why that is, because I'm looking forward to having some of that 401k around at some point.
That's right. You sympathize with that position.
Looks like Christina also has some.
Yeah. I just wanted to add that, we were starting to go, it was a weak one, but we were starting to go into a bull market because the market started feeling a little bit more confident. And then all of these shenanigans started again. We got downgraded because of the shenanigans of the Republican Party. So I think that they're hearing from them now. I have a gut feeling that all of these people that are on Wall Street and stuff, they're hollering at them now to try to tell them to stop it, and they're not going to wait for the shutdown. We know that they call when the shutdown happens and said, "Hey, stop." But there's just something in my gut that says, "Oh no, they're calling now, and telling them to stop it."
Well, yeah, I think that's true. It would have to do with intensity and volume. I would also say that it is true that we got a credit downgrade that was very annoying and unnecessary, but there's some other reasons why the market is sideways beyond the market not appreciating the divisions in DC. And it is absolutely true that the Fed has navigated. We're getting job growth, and now we're getting a real increase in wages after inflation, but the market's got some things to deal with in terms of year-to-year growth, and I wouldn't think that investors would place all that blame on House Republicans. I wanted to add at Reed's suggestion the no labels movement. So there's just a very long piece in New York Times on this, and I continue to hold the opinion that there's no traction there. So as you may know, some of you who follow it, Joe Manchin and John Huntsman, who was once governor of Utah, had a press conference where they disagreed on some things and then talked about no labels, and neither of them said they were running or not running. And then Larry Hogan, the former governor, Republican governor of Maryland, has done the same thing. And then Sununu of New Hampshire has said that he wouldn't do that. And I don't think there's anything there. It is too hard to get a third party on a presidential ballot. You have to start early, and you have to have somebody who is charismatic and intelligent and known enough to steal us away. And if Larry Hogan was in the Republican primary, he'd get 10%. So the reason that I think it's not going to happen is it's too risky for Democrats. I think some people who are involved in it, Manchin, Hogan, Sununu, all know that Donald Trump is a fool and an idiot and a liar and tried to overthrow the government. And they're not going to do something. Huntsman believes that too. So I think they're not going to do it because they're afraid what it would do, which would be throw the election. That's my view. But we'll see. I want to go on to what Democrats should do in our remaining time. Anybody got anything they want to dispute before I do that? What do Democrats do? 70% in the polls don't want Joe to run. First, let's stipulate that in some regards, he's been the most effective Democratic president since, say, LBJ and the Great Society, or maybe FDR. It was an enormous set of legislative victories, some of them dependent on the fact that it was Joe. I mean, that he had worked as a senator for 36 years, vice president for 8, and he got some trust from some people, including Mitch. And so that's good. And we should thank him for that. And we should ask him to retire before we blow the election. What do we have going for us? Choice, big time. Again and again, when choice gets on the ballot, we win. And we get another 5% of people who weren't going to vote or weren't necessarily going to vote with us. A lot of them, women independents. And that will keep happening. That's going to happen a year from now in November. And all across the country, Democratic activists are figuring out a way to get choice on the ballot for that reason. And that will help us a lot. I think the fact that Trump is on trial obviously will help us a lot, and that there's big fights among Republicans will help us a lot. The reason why Ukraine doesn't help us a lot is Joe Biden does not want to sharply criticize the 60 Republican House members because he's afraid that it will turn Ukraine into a partisan issue. He doesn't want that. Right now, he's got more than half of the House Republicans with him. He's got some key House Republicans who are not going to turn their back on Ukraine. He wants it that way, and he wants to not have that be a campaign issue because he's afraid it will turn into a pure partisan issue. So that's why that doesn't happen. So we're left with our campaign so far is we're the party for choice that is not affiliated with a felon who tried to overthrow the government of the United States. That's a pretty good argument with independent voters. Those same people are afraid of electing an 82-year-old person. So we got to do something. The other thing that's working against us, as you know, is I was reflecting back in the early days of Obamacare. Obamacare was an insult. And as those of you know, we got killed in the 2010 election over that one word, Obamacare. And then around 2017, it started polling positive. And what Biden wants is for Biden, the same thing to happen with Bidenomics. That is, it was called Bidenomics by Republicans as an insult, and it meant so much spending that inflation ensued, and they want him to own inflation and high interest rates. Of course, that's a problematic argument. The problem with this problematic argument is Joe has decided, well, it's out there, I might as well own it. I'm going to redefine Bidenomics to mean massive employment growth and a reduced inflation, which by sometime next year will be around 3%, and the voters will change their view of Bidenomics to be a positive thing. The problem with that is people, once they have inflation in their head, don't let it go quite as fast as we need it to go. So that's my worry. I'm thinking that that we could stand to have a fresh slate of younger folks and thank Joe and have somebody run with an economic platform with the usual Democratic arguments, but not have to own inflation. So that could be Gretchen Whitmer or Klobuchar. I don't think she's going to do it. It could be a number of people, but I'm desperate for us to run someone of the next generation for president. Comments, thoughts?
How about how about Gavin Newsom?
I think slowly and surely it's become a detriment to be from California. I'm not saying that I'm just saying it's so easy to
Demonize?
do that. Yeah.
Demonize the 5th largest economy in the world. I mean,
Well,
California is the 5th largest county.
Did Gavin Newsom do that?
No, it was all built up, but you know,
I think he's a pretty smart guy. He had a little kerfuffle with a party during the COVID that I found annoying. I don't have anything against Gavin Newsom. I just want to run somebody who's going to win. I prefer a woman. All of the things. Well,
me too. I would prefer a woman also. Yeah.
Like
how about our vice president?
I thought I like Whitmer because she got labor back in that election last November. We'd been having a lot of trouble with labor all through the Midwest. Of course, she was running against a bunch of kooks, but nonetheless, she got to turn around the legislature. I think Kamala Harris has no traction, but I'm not saying anything that you're not thinking yourself. So if Klobuchar,
I love Gretchen. I think that she would be an excellent president. I mean, I used to be that we voted for governors. I mean, a lot of times governors turned into presidents, not so much senators. And I would definitely vote for her myself.
Well, you know, Jimmy Carter was a governor, and George W. Bush was a governor, and Clinton was governor.
Melissa has a comment.
Yeah, Melissa.
It's a little bit off topic. I was wondering how you think the pending UAW strike will affect Bidenomics.
Well, I think it's too bad. The timing is too bad, and I wouldn't tell UAW what to do if the companies have profits. You know, they want to improve their situation. The reason why it won't help Joe Biden is they're trying. There's a needle out there still in the midst of being threaded, and that is get inflation down, have interest rates, help push them down, high interest rates, and miss a recession. And so far, that's pretty much what we've done. And taking auto manufacturing out of that picture, even for a month, hurts Joe's argument quite a bit. Of course, UAW knows that, but they've got to do whatever they've got to do. So I think it's definitely a negative.
Yeah, me too. I have one other unrelated thing. I want to get my position down. I think that those 70% of people who think Biden is too old, when it comes down to the election, because he's the nominee, they'll vote for him rather than see Trump get in office.
Well,
Even-
I think he thinks that too, but you said that as an absolute. That's a pretty high absolute, because some of those 70%.
Maybe not 70% of them, but a lot of them will.
Absolutely, I agree with you. So
They may say now that they don't, sure, we'd all like somebody younger, but I think Biden is still sharp mentally.
well, there's a risk to that, as you know, because you could nominate him and then something could happen that shows obvious deterioration after you nominated him. But I agree with you that he's counting on a lot of people who don't want him to run because of his age to come into the fold because of a rematch, say with Trump. I think it's bad. It's too risky. It's bad for America. I think it's bad if it's Trump, if it's Biden versus Haley, because it's a generational dispute. I've been saying this for a year. I love Joe Biden. I just don't think that, as I said, I'm 75, and I don't want to fly overnight to Kyiv. So I just think that he doesn't have I was walking down the street Winslow Way the other day, and a friend said that I'm crazy, and Joe Biden said exemplar of good health, and he shouldn't be penalized. I just don't feel that way. It's a 4-year term. I did elect him in for a 1-week term in a second. I think I'm not sentimental about it. I want it. Last time we had a Republican president, it was awful. I don't want to do that again.
Well, I think that the reason you don't feel like you want to fly to Kyiv at night is because you have not drunken the powerful juice of being commander in chief of the United States of America. I think that it's up to Joe Biden to figure out that he's not going to run. And I think it's going to be very hard to convince him. And everybody else is going to, I think he owns the seat. How else would he be ousted outside of unfortunate health?
Yeah. So there's 3 things that could happen. It is ironic that when LBJ announced in April of 1968 that he wasn't running, that Bobby Kennedy had already announced against him, and McCarthy, and it was Humphrey that was waiting, unfortunately for him, because he got the nomination and then Nixon beat him. But it's ironic that the person that's announced against Biden is Robert Kennedy Jr., a different stripe. 3 things could happen. First, Biden could be visited by a number of cardinals of the Democratic faith who have read the polls. So I don't know who would have the guts to do that, but all of a sudden there could be Obama and 6 or 7 others and say, Joe, we love you, man, please. The second thing that could happen is he could find out something about his health that compels him to not run. That could happen. The third thing that could happen, and there are analysts who believe this to this day, is that he doesn't intend to run, that he's holding the spot. His campaign is not that aggressive, and that this is all being a placeholder so that he won't weaken himself with Congress, and that maybe sometime this fall he'll decide he's not running. There are people, analysts, serious political analysts, that believe that he's not running. So one of those 3 things would have to happen. You're right that if those analysts are wrong and he intends to run, that getting him to not would be hard. You could get a situation where the Democrats were so worried that somebody like Gavin Newsom could call him and say, I love you, man, I'm running. That's possible. You could do that in a really respectful way. It would split the Democratic Party, but you could do that. I mean, it's not totally out of the question. One of those things is going to happen. I hereby predict that Joe Biden will not be on the ballot. And I that's what I said 6 months ago, and I'm going to be right.
You're on record, David.
Yeah.
Tom, did you want to say something?
Yes, I totally agree with David on that. I'm 85, and there's no way in God's green earth that I would want to be running for president or anything else right now. But the other thing I wanted to mention, I read this morning for the first time a comment comparing what's happening with Trump to what Ford did with Nixon in the pardon. There's talking like Ford pardoned Nixon because he thought it was good for the country, it would heal the rift and so on. And I think we're going to be reading a lot more about that, comparing that with Trump. That we shouldn't let this, the court cases continue. We should let Trump off the hook because it would be the best thing for the country. I totally disagree with that, but I believe that's what we're going to start seeing.
Yeah, I think it'll play out in the campaign as a yes or no question to Republican candidates as to whether they would pardon him if convicted. And by then he might well have been convicted. So that would make it an even juicier question and a hard one for them to answer. I myself want to see the convictions. I've visited people in federal prison before, and I don't necessarily have to see them there, but I want justice to prevail. And the way it played out, as you remember, Tom, is that hurt the Republican Party a lot. It was Jerry Ford's argument that healing needed to begin, but it polled 65-35 against, and there were a lot of that led to some considerable Democratic strength immediately thereafter, and it certainly didn't help. Gerald Ford, as you know, lost to Jimmy Carter partially because of it. I knew Gerald Ford a little bit, at least through my mentor, who was the Republican governor of Michigan, and Gerald Ford was really decent human being, but he was not seen by other members of Congress as having advanced ideas. He was kind of a plodder, but maybe that was good at that time. Remember, he was never elected. Nelson Rockefeller was the vice president, and I don't know how'd that go. So Spiro Agnew was the vice president, and ultimately Ford.
Yeah.
So thank you. I'm going to go home from Martha's Vineyard to Bainbridge Island. I understand there's a troll to be seen off in the woods.
Yes.
We had a lovely conversation with Dawn Janow, one of the park commissioners, about the troll and how she helped with organizing and those people who helped pay for it. And if you go to youtube.com/BI Senior Center, you can learn all about Pia the Peacemaker before or after you go visit her in Sakai Park.
Yeah. Sounds
Sounds good. We'll all do it.